Hey, welcome to PCSgrades PCS Q&A Coronavirus Edition. I am your host, MJ Boyce, and we're going to be talking to some amazing folks here. We've got Megan Harless, who is a PCS reform advocate. She's my co-host. I'm sure you know her. You do not live under a rock, and hopefully you've seen these videos before. So before we get into things, there's just a couple housekeeping items that I wanted to go ahead and let you all know. One of those things is that all of your questions will at some point be answered, whether that is from the comments below. If we don't know the answer, we'll put you in touch with somebody who does. If we don't know either of those things, we will take that answer for that question for action, and we'll get that answer to you. Second thing, no matter what happens, no matter what question you have, there are two very important resources. Number one, your local transportation office, and number two, your chain of command. Those are the people who know you. Those are the people who have your stuff. Those are the people who are going to be working with you. They are going to know your individual situation, and they're the ones that are going to be the end-all be-all say of what happens going forward. With that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and hand you over to Megan, and she's gonna give us some updates about what's happening in the world of PCS Stop Movement. Megan?
Hey everybody, so I am Megan. If you don't know me, I'm a PCS reform advocate trying to improve the process that we all go through at some point within our military career. A couple updates that we've got for you this week. So breaking from yesterday is that the stop move order is going to be extended. Currently, it's supposed to go through May 11th for CONA shipments, May 25th for OCONA shipments. In a press conference yesterday, the Secretary of Defense, Esper, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, had commented that they are going to extend and modify the stop order movement. They currently do not have a date for when that stop movement order will go to. That should be released within the next couple of days as they work with the services to put some other things in place for the service members and their families. Some of those things that they're working on that they're going to hopefully provide us in the next couple of days is clearer guidance about the exception to policies and the exemptions that families can get to be able to continue their PCS. So with that, some of it's hardship stuff, some of it's mission essential, some of it is, you've sold a house and you need to go, move into the house that you already bought. So they're working through some clearer guidance for those exception to policies for families to be able to apply for. And they're also looking at how to prioritize shipments as well. So if we get to the point where we can't move everybody this summer as we have in the past, they're going to look at how they can prioritize who gets to move first, who gets to move second kind of deal. And so some of those factors they're looking at are those that are on those hardship tours. So either unaccompanied overseas hardship tour or a hardship financially because you bought a house and you're paying, a rent or double mortgage. They're going to look at sending those people first, also taking into consideration those with school-age children. They know a lot of people enjoy moving through the summer because you can get in place before the next school year starts, and they know that's a big issue. So they're going to take a look at that as well to figure out if they have to prioritize who goes first and what that priority level kind of looks like. A couple of things to kind of help families out. Especially, last week we talked to some realtors. Today we're talking with some lenders about housing issues. So the senior enlisted advisor to the chairman had said last week, I believe on Friday during his town hall, is that they are going to try to help families as much as they can. So your BAH, they're going to continue that. At some point when you move, there's a pause in it as you go from one location to another. They're going to continue it. So if you have to have that double housing payment, if you have to be in a hotel longer, you're still going to have your BAH to help offset those costs. And then the other thing that hasn't really been talked about a lot yet lately is that they're going to offer a family separation housing allowance. And so that's for if you have two houses, your service member moved ahead of you, or the spouse and children went ahead and a service member was going to follow and they got held up in the stop movement order, and now you have two homes you're paying for. That family separation housing allowance is designed to help offset the cost of those two homes. And then finally, not quite PCS related, but another big issue for military families is, every year come September, there's use or lose leave that service members have to take. This year, a lot of spring breaks were canceled. A lot of leave for the summer is being canceled due to the stop move orders and everything. So they are looking at putting in place a policy to allow that user leave to be carried over into the next fiscal year. So that way nobody has to lose out on taking their leave. That's all we've got right now for updates. I know we're all going to be waiting over the next couple of days to see what guidance the Secretary of Defense puts out for when the stop move order goes to. And so when that happens, we will definitely be bringing you that information as well.
Thank you, Megan. I absolutely appreciate those updates. And yes, absolutely, yesterday was a huge, huge deal when it came to the extension of the stop move. And again, we're in uncertain times, but if anybody's able to roll with it, it's military families. It doesn't make it any less stressful. We got your back. And I've said it before in every other live video, and we're saying it again now. As we flatten the curve, we're going to flatten Murphy with it. Write it down, hashtag it, it's happening. With that, we're going to go ahead and roll right into our questions, and we're going to introduce our awesome guests. So we have two very awesome military lending specialists with us, and we're going to let them introduce themselves and give a brief overview of kind of what they do and how they're helping military families, and then we'll roll right into those questions. So Gitesh, if you could just start us off and introduce yourself, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Thank you, MJ. I'm a branch manager with Fairway Independent Branch Mortgage. I've been in the business now for 20 years. Primarily work with military clients, active duty and veterans. My passion has always been educating clients and helping them make the most educated decision for the biggest purchase of their life.
Ooh, awesome. Thank you, Gitesh, and welcome. Brian, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, well, thanks for having me. My name is Brian Birch. I'm the National Director of Military and Veteran Lending for Caliber Home Loans. I have the honor and privilege of spending most of my time traveling the country, speaking to real estate professionals, mortgage professionals, military and veterans, educating them on the benefits of the VA home loan benefit. So that's pretty much what I do in a nutshell.
Yay. And can I just say a big fat thank you for supporting our military families in this crazy time, but also always. That being said, we have a lot of questions. We've seen a lot of questions in our group, Lost During My PCS. If you're not a member, you should look into it. We have over 26,000 people who are going through the same thing that you are. And it's a one-stop shop for resources. One of the questions and the concerns and the comments that we're having is that a lot of families are in limbo. They're holding two mortgages, or they were going to buy a house when they moved, and now they don't know what to do. And there's so much confusion going on that everybody has very similar questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask those questions on your behalf. It's going to be a high-level overview, but if you have any questions you have, put them right down there in the comments. Right down there, because you know what's going to happen? We're going to forward them on once this is over to these awesome gentlemen here, and they're going to help us navigate that situation. So the first question that we have is it safe for military families to go under contract today, not knowing if the stop movement order is going to be, when the stop movement order is actually going to end since it's been extended? So is it a smart time for military families to be buying a home? Like, is it safe? We'll start with you, Gitesh.
Right. I guess Brian is getting the easy questions. You're welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is it safe? Is it safe? You know, I think that just depends on each individual's financial situation. You mentioned earlier that they may have to carry two mortgages. They have to pay their housing allowance and have a mortgage payment if they don't get to move right away. What I can tell you is one of the most important things our veterans can do is work with the right real estate agent and a lender to make sure that they bring this up ahead of time. Working with the right realtor can help them request extension on their contracts, kind of putting in that contingency up front that they may or may not be able to close as initially scheduled on whether it be May 11th or June 15th or July 15th for that matter. The reality is today that we have millions of individuals in this country who are unemployed. And if they were looking to sell a home today, they may be putting that on hold as well. So with the right house, right real estate agent, it may be smart to buy a house where they can write an offer today, but don't have to go for closing until 60 to 90 days from now.
Okay. All right. Brian, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to a little bit of that, and, you know, Gitesh is spot on, but just to add a little color, I think, you know, being in the military myself, you know, I'm on the reserve side of things, and, you know, so I get to see a lot of this stuff go down. And, you know, one thing I would always caution people to do is make sure that they're exercising good financial management, right? So to Gitesh's points, you know, everybody's situation is different. But number one, though, making sure that you know, exercise good judgment, because, you know, there's scenarios where folks just, they know that they will be moving to that marketplace, right? They know that it's not a matter of if, but when, and the spouse and the kids are more than happy to go ahead and move there now. Those scenarios, I can see why somebody would be willing to put themselves out there and do that, because it's not a matter of if, but it's when. But when you have scenarios where you're not even sure if those orders are going to be executed just due to the, you know, the travel bans and everything else. I mean, we're hearing stories of people that's not even might not even be executing on their orders anymore. Well, if that is the level of uncertainty, you know, obviously you need to move forward with a lot of caution. And I would suggest that you not put yourself out there or put your family at risk on something like that. You know what I mean? So I think you have, you know, a couple different scenarios there. And number one, you just got to execute on good, you know, good judgment, good financial management, and good judgment on this.
Definitely. And I mean, the military community, we have contingency plans for our contingency plans. But when we've exhausted all of the potential who, what, when, where, how, and then COVID enters, like, we didn't see that coming. Okay, that's a new one. That's awesome. Exercising caution and having that good financial, you know, management backing it's smart. It makes sense. Go ahead.
If I can add one thing to what Brian said,
Mm-hmm.
You know, financial management is a great piece, and he's absolutely right. If you don't have your hard orders in hand today, you really shouldn't be going under contract, because you don't know when they will be executed. There are many layers of risk that will be assessed before the orders are finalized. So one thing you can do is, if you know you're moving and you are in contact with a real estate professional, it may not be a bad idea to have your finances reviewed ahead of time and make sure you are prepared and you're using this time wisely to put yourself in a best position to win a bid on the house when you are in the market to buy. So 4 months from now, you are not starting the process. You've been in the process of 4 months. You know exactly what you have to do to win 4 months from now.
That makes sense. Yeah, because I mean, we're planners anyways. So, I mean, yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Megan?
Yeah, so I saw this thing recently that you needed a 700 credit score now for a home loan. Is that across the board? Is that only a special group of people? And if so, like, how might that credit score impact our military families?
So you mind if I take this one real quick? I'll
Go right ahead.
I'll grease the wheels for you, Gitesh. So one thing that consumers need to kind of get a good understanding of is every lender is different, right? Caliber is different than Fairway. Fairway is different than Caliber. Yes, we all offer mortgages, but we all have our own set of guidelines that we like to operate, you know, and lend money based on, right? So when you hear stories of lenders making adjustments to their overall credit profiles of the loans that they're willing to take in, please don't mistake that as an industry-wide change, okay? Know that every lender is different, which is also a good benefit to a customer too, right? That's another good benefit to you as a consumer, that every lender, you know, is different, that you can shop around. But don't let messages like, you know, minimum FICO scores and changes to loan to values and having to put 20% down, you know, kind of impact your decision thinking. You need to reach out to, you know, people who specialize in this niche, right? With VA lending, you want to go to somebody who I like to call them practitioners that focus specifically on this type of product, and work with those people because they can help navigate you through what's real and what's not. And I know I saw a message on one lender going to 700 FICO, 20% down on purchases. And I can tell you, you know, that's just one specific, you know, lender. So don't let it impact your decision on buying a house.
Gitesh?
So, you know, so Brian is spot on with this, where it is each individual lender that is making changes to their guidelines, temporary changes as we get through this pandemic together, to protect their individual interests. You know, everyone is trying to survive in this market. So 700 credit score is a reality for a lot of the lenders, but Brian is right. Not every lender is making those changes. One of the most important things we need to hear out of this is that these are temporary changes, and these changes are not being mandated by VA. Lenders are making these changes to protect themselves, just to ensure that there is an opportunity for them to sell the loan in the secondary market. That's the reality. So, you know, how does it impact our military families? Where if you are currently under contract and you're looking to buy a home and your credit rating is under 700, what you should be doing is reaching out to your lender and making sure that they are still able to lend to you if you go under contract. If you are under contract and you're looking and you are in the process of doing a loan, make sure you call your lender and confirm that they have not made any changes to their guidelines. Because if they have, our veterans have to call around and make sure they can find a lender who can still close. The scary part in all of this is that the guidelines are changing on each individual lender level almost daily. You know, Brian looks extremely calm, being in the operation side of it. It's hard to keep up with the guideline changes. You know, every morning you get up and you have 5 more changes that are being imposed to prevent further bleeding in this market, without any real support from without any real support. I'm not going to point any fingers, but just no real support. So everyone is adjusting on their own, just trying to survive. So our veterans should just be proactive, not assume that if they were pre-approved yesterday, they are pre-approved today. Just because they are not pre-approved today or they don't qualify to buy a home today does not mean that they don't qualify to buy a home 2 months from now. As things settle down, you know, if I had to predict, I will think it will follow the curve. You know, as the curve starts to flatten and more liquidity happens in the market, we will see the guidelines loosen and go back to normal. So for someone who doesn't qualify today, they can buy a home 2 months from now or 3 months from now, or whenever the things get back to normal, whatever normal is.
Right, whatever normal is. I don't think I've experienced normal since I was 19 years old and became a military spouse. You could write that down and take it to them. So that question kind of rolls into my question, which, I mean, and you kind of addressed it, was, you know, like, if a family goes under contract, well, what happens if they raise the credit score requirements after they're approved and are already under contract? Like, how does that even work?
Well, so I will tell you that, I will tell you this. So if you are, there's a difference. You know, you can be under contract and not have done any of the paperwork with the lender, right? And this does happen, as crazy as it sounds and as scary as it is sometimes. And I'm sure Gitesh has been on the end of this early in his career, where it's like, hey, we signed a contract over the week on a new house. I need to get money. You know what I mean? And that does happen. The good part, though, I think, in a lot of lenders, I can't speak for every lender, but I will tell you a lot of lenders exercise the perspective of, if we have you in the system and have an application date for you, and we've changed guidelines effective, May 1, you are effectively still grandfathered in under the old guidelines within that lender. But to Gitesh's point earlier, communication is key. Like, there's no such thing in the lending world of no news is good news. Like, do not operate that way, especially right now with everything being so volatile. The stresses in the military community plus in the mortgage community right now, this is the perfect storm. So this is even more of a time where you need to be, attached to the hip to your, professional loan officers, and talking to them and making sure that the target hasn't moved for you. You know what I mean? So communication is key at this point. This is, and I would highly recommend folks to not go put houses under contract prior to having your finances in order and approved. That's just not appropriate.
No, and I mean, that's like putting the cart before the horse, right?
Oh, yeah,
Gitesh, do you agree? Is that how? Yeah.
I agree with Brian. I think one thing he mentioned, well, two things he brought up, which are crucial. Like, one, going under contract without having your financials reviewed, without speaking to a professional in the lending world, it's crazy. So if you are doing that today, please stop and talk to someone who can, and make sure that you have your paperwork checked out up front before you go under contract. With that said, there are two aspects to it. One of them is the pre-approval, which is when you are still shopping for a home, you have gone through a lender, they have looked at your paperwork. That would not be considered an application, if you may. So if you are currently pre-approved, most lenders should be communicating with you and letting you know that you qualified yesterday, but starting today, you won't qualify based on your individual criteria. An application, like Brian mentioned earlier, most lenders are honoring the guidelines as of the application date. Application date would be the day where we have all of your financials, we have a complete uniform residential loan application completed, including property address, income, social security number, the whole 9 yards. Once we have that, it's considered an application. Then the next piece becomes locking in the interest rate. So if your interest rate is locked, most lenders, again, are honoring the interest rate for you. There are a handful, as Brian knows, all over our emails, that are simply putting their hands up and saying, we can no longer close this loan. Despite our commitment to you in the beginning, despite the application date, despite the rate lock or anything. So communication is essential. Working with the right company now is more important than anything else. Having the mindset of, I'm just looking for the best deal. I'm just looking for the cheapest rate. If I had a penny for every time I said this, I would be a rich man and may or may not be on this call or in this profession. But, if you're looking for cheap, sometimes you end up getting cheap. So just be really careful what you wish for these days. Working with the right company, a reputable company, is very important, now more than ever.
No, and that's definitely good advice. Just for the record, and I think I've talked to you both offline about this. Well, guess what? Megan's in the same boat that I am. Neither one of us are homeowners living, like my husband and I lived on base his whole career. You know what I mean? And I'm renting for the first time. Like when we moved here 4 years ago, like who pays their first electric bill when they're 35? This chick right here. So all of this is coming through the lens of the same people who are watching right now, which is fantastic. This advice, if I'm understanding it, I know they are, which is awesome. Megan?
Yeah. So a lot of military folks, they use the VA home loan. So right now we know the VA doesn't have a debt to income ratio requirement. With everything that's going on in the world right now, do you anticipate a debt to income ratio becoming an issue for military families that are looking to buy a home?
Brian, I'll take this one first.
Sure.
So I'll go back to what I said earlier. VA has not made any changes to their guidelines as of this morning, as it relates to debt to income ratio. They have made some changes and some, I guess they've added some leniency around appraisal issues, because appraisals can go out and inspect the property, but no changes to their guidelines as of this morning. However, each individual lender is looking at these guideline changes, temporary guideline changes, to protect their self-interest at the moment, and that of the customers, and imposing some sort of debt to income ratio requirement. Again, most lenders are. Some lenders are still out there lending just freely on VA guidelines as of today. Not sure how long that is sustainable, but it could become a reality short term, but no changes imposed by VA. Right?
Yeah. So yeah, Gitesh is right on, definitely on that. VA kind of, you know, there's no changes with VA, but here's one thing I will tell you. So the VA home loan benefit operates under something called residual income in the first place, right? So a long time ago, they came up with this matrix of how they would factor the ability to repay, and it's worked out great because whether your audience knows it or not, and I like to think this has a lot to do with the demographic itself, but also the way that they underwrite these is they make sure that people have enough money at the end of the month, after all their bills are paid, that they can still afford to live in this house, right? And that's called residual income. And so I would say that if you do ever see any changes happening, and I don't think they would ever come from VA, but with lenders, that the increase in the amount of residual income requirement could possibly come into effect for, you know, different lenders as they navigate through this volatility. But because the default rates are so extremely low on this, especially in the active duty military demographic, because, you know, unfortunately, most military families are one income anyway, right? Because the military spouse has a hard enough time that it is finding employment. So during epidemics like this, you know, the good news about being employed with the military is you're still getting a paycheck, right? So most of the time your residual income is really not impacted by stuff like this, like it is a civilian or a veteran who just has a spouse, or they both might be income impacted. But again, it goes off of residual income, and I've been in the military long enough and gone through their own residual income calculations where they, by the time you're done, you should know how much money you have at the end of the month, you know, left over to spend, and whether or not you can afford to buy a house. And, you know, that's how they operate, and that's how they navigate underwriting right now. And that's how the VA kind of dictates it. So it'd be interesting to see, to Gitesh's point, you know, how this happens over the next couple months. But, you know, that's kind of how they operate. They don't really operate off a debt to income ratio.
Okay, so in that respect, so because I mean, everything is just, it's kind of like, I said this last week, it's kind of like a house of cards. You know what I mean? One thing out of place and boom, the whole thing comes kind of tumbling down. We've got a lot of families right now. I've seen so many families in this group of 26,000 people that we have that are in this situation where they are carrying like 2 mortgages, okay, which is just bananas. And thank you, Megan, for giving those updates about some of the recourse, you know, available for those individuals who may not be in that situation. So for those who bought a house and maybe haven't sold one yet, double mortgage rent, is there any like financial protections or assistance to like help with scenarios like this? I've heard a lot about the word forbearance over the last couple of weeks. What do you think that military families should know about forbearance as an option? And if not that, what's their other recourse? So
You can make your payment, you need to make it. Simple in that.
Yeah.
You can afford to make your payment, you need to make it. There's a lot of, and I'm sure Gitesh has probably been pounded on this as well from, his corporate office too, about forbearance and everything else. I mean, the bottom line is there's a lot of misinformation out there about this whole thing, right? Obviously, if you've been impacted negatively and there's going to be challenges making your payment, well, that is obviously a tool available for you and your family to exercise to get through this, obviously bad stint that we're in. However, just because you don't have to make the payment now doesn't mean that they're not going to take the money later, right? So there's definitely things that you need to understand, and communicating with your lender is very important and critical at this point, if this is a problem for you. But if I can make my payment, you need to make your payment, right? Because one thing's for sure, and I'm just going to talk about this from the active duty military side, is if you decide to go into forbearance, just because you're borderline or whatever, or you just decide that this is probably, you're going to use the COVID scenario to put yourself in forbearance, and you go into forbearance for 90 days, and said lender is asking you to pay your $6,000 in back mortgage payments due, and you can't, right, because you don't have the money, then you have to go into a modification of some sort. And what if this has some kind of negative impact on your credit report eventually down the road, because now you're playing some dangerous game back and forth with your mortgage, right? And if that happens and your credit gets jacked up and you carry a TS or some high clearance, well, guess what? You're not getting a TS or some high clearance anymore because your credit's messed up, right? And now all of a sudden, now you have problems. So just be very cautious in what you're going to leverage and what tools you're going to use, and make sure that you really need to use them before you do it. That's my perspective.
Gitesh.
No, Brian, you're on the right track here. My phone does ring off the hook with questions about forbearance. And it's the same message that we are giving out, that if you can make your payment, make your payment. Right? Understanding what forbearance means, I believe, is the key here. So your question was, what options the military families have. Forbearance is an option for our military families. But before going into any kind of an agreement with your servicer, it is important to understand what it really means. Right? So the first question becomes, is forbearance free? Well, I've never had a free lunch. Brian, have you ever had a free lunch? No such thing in life, right? So it's not free, as in it's free as in it doesn't cost you anything to request forbearance, but there are implications of it long term that you need to understand. As of right now, what the federal government has approved, or what they're asking the servicers to do, is allow for a 6-month forbearance without really any questions being asked, right? So you can call and request forbearance, but you should only do it if you are truly facing a hardship, because forbearance has always been there, right? It has existed forever. It just wasn't mandated by the federal government upon all the servicers. So forbearance, in essence, is your request to forgive your payments for a certain amount of time, or modify your mortgage because you're going through a financial hardship. So understanding that you're making this request and pretty much stating that you're going through a financial hardship can impact you in the future. So it's there for 6 months, right? Is the money that you don't pay per month, is it forgiven? The answer is no. You have to pay it back. So understanding when talking to your servicer upfront, what happens to the money that you're not paying is important. Are they going to reinstate the mortgage? Which means that after the 6 months, you have to pay back the balance. So the said $2,000 mortgage that Brian mentioned, do you have to pay back $12,000 at the end of 6 months? If you have the money, you can, and you're back to normal. The fact that you had a forbearance still exists on your credit, on your mortgage reporting history, which can impact your ability to get security clearance, another loan in the future, ability to refinance in the future. All those things are still going to be in play, but you first have to pay the $12,000. Let's assume for a second you don't have the money to pay back. Your other option is to request a repayment plan where you can pay back the remaining balance that you didn't pay for 6 months over the course of following 12 months. Either way, the servicer gets paid. So you have to pay it back. And there's deferment, where the payments are added back to the end of your term. So your maturity term of your loan remains the same. You got the loan on June 30th, 2019. It ends June 30th, 2049. Come June 30th, 2049, you have to pay back the remaining $12,000. It's added to the back of your term. Or you can request a modification of your mortgage, where the total balance is taken into consideration. And then if your servicer allows, takes a look at your finances, they will modify your payment over the course of the remaining term of your loan, and you pay back the balance. The most important piece for me out of this forbearance conversation has been that it does impact your ability to qualify for a loan in the future, right? Over the certain period of time, servicers have already said, lenders have already said that if you're going through a forbearance today, your loan will not be, you may not be eligible for a loan over a certain period of time because you went through that forbearance today. So make sure you understand that and take all of that into consideration before you just apply for forbearance because you can. Brian said it twice. I think if he could, he will say it 2 more times. If you can pay. It's really meant for individuals who are going through a hardship, can't afford to make the payment. It is impacting their ability to meet their day-to-day financial needs. You should be making your payments.
No, absolutely. And again, that's really important. It really, let's just say it. It sucks. This situation sucks on so many levels, and everybody is in this same boat. But like you said, both of you said, if you can, just do it. I'm a fan of ramen noodles anyways, so I'm fine. I'm totally fine with chilling with my ramen noodles and making sure that chunk, like I remember when I was a kid, my dad always said, you pay your house payment first.
Yep.
The electric bill, all that other stuff, like that's not gonna matter if you don't have a place to rest your head. Why pay for electric if you can't pay for the house? That being said, you should never get to that point, but we're in really uncertain times right now. So the house would be where you're living, where you sleep at night, where you're sheltered, where you're safe is the most important aspect of all the things. Megan, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've got one more big question for you guys. So what can or should a military family be doing now during this time if they were thinking about buying a home or if they were preparing to buy a home during the STOP movement? And what action should they be taking either way to prepare for the home buying process?
Gitash, do you want to go take that one? Oh, you're on mute, bud.
I'll take this one first. Can you hear me now? Because Brian got all the easy ones earlier. I can take this one. Had it easy all this time. I think I mentioned it earlier, and Brian mentioned it in different ways, where what you can do right now is prepare yourself to buy a home. Talk to a mortgage professional, talk to your real estate agent, understand and educate yourself on different closing costs involved in buying a home. Get your paperwork reviewed up front. So this way, when the time comes and you have your orders and you know when you can move, you're not having to scramble through your paperwork and find out where you filed your W-2 or your tax returns. The gift in all of this is that we do have time. Whether we wanted it or not, we now have an extra 1, 2, 3 months to gather this paperwork and be better prepared to buy a home when the time comes. So why not take advantage of this and go through the education process? Ask all those difficult questions that you sometimes don't get a chance to ask because the markets are so competitive, as they will be, right? Come June, July, when everyone can move and there are 1,500 buyers lined up to buy 10 homes, you really may not have time to educate yourself or ask a lot of questions because you have 2 hours to write an offer, get pre-approved, go under contract, and get a home inspection done. That could become the next reality or the new normal in the real estate industry. So use this time to educate yourself. Talk to your real estate agent, talk to your lender, get your financials reviewed, and then be ready to buy a home.
Good.
Brian?
Yeah, I would say to Gitesh's point, use this time to get organized, right? Know your plan, like know your game plan. A couple things that people need to consider now, right? Because it used to be, hey, listen, I'm just going to keep my home that I have now because I have plenty of entitlement to buy another home where I'm going, and I'm just going to rent this one out, right? That's it used to be kind of an easy layup for folks to say, I'll just rent this out to another family when they come in, and I'm down with being a landlord. Well, this gives you an opportunity to really think hard on this now, because with forbearances flying, like, buy one, get one free on the shelf right now, I don't know if I'd want to be a landlord. I don't know if I'd want to be a landlord in some of these states that are allowing forbearance for renters for up to 12 months. Can you imagine that gift? You move to a new market, you PCS'd, because we've talked about this before, you're talking about people floating 2 payments, right? They get to a new market, everybody's happy, all of a sudden your tenant calls you and says, I'm exercising the forbearance rules and I want to put my rent in forbearance for the next 12 months. What kind of financial impact do you think that's going to have on a military family, right? A significant one. And so stuff like that needs to be, if you're in that scenario where you're currently a homeowner and you were thinking about becoming a landlord, I would think hard and twice as long about that, knowing that the environment that we're in today is not very landlord friendly. So that's just my word of advice.
I hadn't even considered it from that perspective, because I do know a lot of my friends who are homeowners who move, they keep their house, they rent out their military families, pay it forward type thing. But, of course, again, nobody saw this coming, so they wouldn't have even thought, I never even would have considered that as an issue. But so thank you for putting that out there. Wow, it kind of just blew my mind just there.
Yeah, for all the military families that are renting, if you can pay.
Yes.
Because your rental payment history is considered in qualifying for a new home purchase.
Yeah.
Dang.
Very true.
I could literally sit here and talk to you guys forever about this, because I'm learning so much, and I'm sure our audience is as well. I want to thank you seriously, because we like to go to those experts, those subject matter experts, and you both have proven 10 times that, literally. To our audience, these guys have been generous enough to accept questions. So any questions that you have, again, leave them in the comment section below. We're staying in touch with them, and they'll help us answer any follow-ups that you may need. Again, number 1 and number 2 points of contact should always and forever be your local transportation office and your chain of command. Period and discussion. But having people like this to be able to point us in the right direction is super important. And I highly encourage you to talk to your friends about what you just saw. Point them to this video. Point them to these gentlemen here. It's absolutely invaluable. So gentlemen, thank you very much for taking care of and caring for our military community. You guys are obviously a huge part of that anyways, but we really, really appreciate it. So I want to thank you. And we don't be surprised if you get a like a follow-up add-on later on down the road. Be like, yeah, we need to revisit this again. I might just have you guys both back on, 2.0 it, if you will.
I'm all up for it. So anytime.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and you have a wonderful day. And stay tuned for next week's PCS Q&A. Bye, guys.
Thank you
for having me.